Hello, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. I am here with Iain Abernethy. Hi, Iain. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Nice to be back, Wim.
Yes. So as you guys know, obviously, because you're all regulars of Iain and my podcast, we've done a couple of crossovers, and I will post some links to those episodes in the show notes. A while ago, I had an idea to do another crossover with Iain because I really enjoy our talks, and it was a little bit of a background story. So the first thing is that, as we all know, the internet is filled with things that are wrong, and we absolutely have to correct when we see something that we deem is incorrect. So and preferably you hit shift lock, you start typing in all caps and yell at people online. Anyway, the main point is that you see a lot of people discussing things in a way that I think is very counterproductive. And I always enjoy it with Iain because we, when we talk, even if we disagree or if we, we come from different backgrounds, we typically, come to a conclusion that is like very constructive. And I wanted to have one of these talks. And my idea was first like, okay, let's find some of the stuff from each other's work that we disagree with, and then we can discuss it. And that failed miserably because I didn't find anything that we disagree with.
Yeah, I didn't know better either.
So that plan went out the window. So we had a different plan, and we asked people, okay, so what are some of your pet peeves or some of the myths that you see in martial arts and self-defense? And Iain and I will discuss these. And the method is this. We are going to steelman the argument first, meaning we're going to try to present the absolute best version, the most positive view in which you can interpret the myth or the pet peeve. And then afterward, we're going to try to destroy it and see how far we get. That's it. All right. Anything you want to add, Iain?
No, that sounds like a good plan. I think it'll be an interesting discussion because just before we started recording, we were saying the internet doesn't do nuance is one of my things. So I think let's do our best not to do nuance either. At least initially.
Yeah. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And for everybody listening, this is the whole point. So long story short, we're living in an information age. There's never been this much information just readily available at your fingertips on your cell phone all over the world. And there's just such an enormous amount of disinformation, but also a lack of the ability to just discuss rationally and in a nuanced manner and honestly. That's the key point, honestly. So I trust Iain, and I hope you trust me. I mean, I'm Belgian, so you shouldn't trust me too much, but the point is that there's no hidden agenda. There's no, I have to beat him at a discussion or anything. There's just two people talking from a slightly different background, martially speaking, but we've been at it for a long time with our own perspectives and experiences, and we're just going to share. And that's the point of a discussion. And I learned that from very bitterly arguing with a friend many years ago, and then eventually becoming best of friends, is that the point of the discussion is not to win. It's the exchange that counts. That's the whole point. It's exchanging ideas and see where you get.
Well, that's what I find, because then you either, there's always the opportunity to learn when you have your own ideas challenged. So I think that's a positive thing. If that challenge reveals a weakness in your thinking or an area where you can improve, that's definitely a good thing. I know that's happened to me many times. Yep. Or even if you walk away thinking, well, that person still has their view, I still have my view, but at least I hold the view more legitimately because I've had it legitimately challenged. Also, the truth doesn't fear pushback. You know what I mean? It becomes stronger from it. So yeah, it's always a good thing to have those kind of discussions.
And I'd like to add to that two things can be right at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's not zero sum. We can definitely end up someplace during the discussion where you see something differently than I do, and that we're both right. It's just the perspective is different, or the interpretation is slightly different, and so on. And that is perfectly acceptable. And in these very, let's say, emotionally, politically charged times, I would say that just because you disagree with somebody doesn't mean that person is a bad person.
No,
okay? It's perfectly fine to disagree. We don't have to hate each other. for thinking of something else.
Yeah, and nor do you need to convert. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
If you hold your idea and someone else holds a different one, that's fine. Yeah, there's no onus on you to kind of win everyone over to your own way of thinking. You know.
Exactly. It's a big world. There's a lot of space for everybody to.
It would be a boring world if everyone thought the same. Yeah.
Dude, we would be running the world. I mean, okay, for the first 5 minutes, and then I would become this crazy dictator, you know, Dr. Evil. Okay.
Horrific thought.
And then some. So we're going to get started. So a lot of the questions basically boil down to the same thing. That doesn't work, or that would never work in real life, in the street, etc., etc. So this was from Robert Wallace, Tiger Jin, Karate Obsession, Karate Unity. All these people basically asked the variation of the same thing. And from Robert, that was good. He said, like, that would never work. And in particularly when you see like CCTV footage showing examples of doing just that. Or what Tiger Jin said, I can't do high kicks, so they're just for show and they don't work in a real fight, which is a slightly different nuance.
Yeah.
And let me see that I'm not forgetting anything. And what Chris said from Karate Unity, like, that's not going to work. It's easy to judge when you're not immersed in the context. You weren't there before it was demonstrated, and stuff like that. Right. So how can we steelman this argument that will never work in the street?
Yeah, so I think we all acknowledge that there are certain things that have a higher probability of working than others.
Yeah.
So I do believe it is legitimate to see something that you feel has a low probability of working, and to make the statement that would never work. I'm always a little bit hesitant with the word never. You know, because there's always exceptions to everything. But if you, for example, let's take one that you would see. So throwing a head-out roundhouse kick, you know what I mean? So someone would go, that would never work. I think it would be true for people, for the vast majority of people, doing something that elaborate and that difficult probably would have an extremely high rate of failure that would be approaching never. As would any complicated long sequences that I can think of, you know. And I mean, let alone when we get to the realms of chi-based, no-touch knockouts and stuff, or long, complex trapping drills. If I'm steelmanning this, I do think it is legitimate to look at something and say, based on what we know about the chaotic nature of live conflict, and the fact that most people are not highly talented individuals and athletes, there are some things we can say are close to never not working.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. If we define never as extremely unlikely to the point of getting close to being impossible, or however you want to define it, then the statement makes a lot of sense. I always enjoyed what Bob Orlando said, is that you've got the different kind of techniques. If you put them on a scale, risk reward, that if you have a technique that has extremely high risk with a potentially relatively low reward, you know, would you even pull that off? And I think viewing things in that light also makes sense. That why would you do such an incredibly complicated thing that has a huge, you know, the odds are extremely against it, and at the same time, the result you will get is unlikely to be very, very useful or satisfactory. So in that regard, I also think it's a good statement. Like, okay, don't do that. I don't know, doing 360 jump spinning kicks for somebody who wants to stab you. Could you make that work? I guess theoretically, I couldn't. I don't know about you, but
no, I couldn't.
I don't. If you look at all the people who are really good at that, like just these incredible, like the Taekwondo kicks you see in demos where they jump and do X amount of spins and kick 15 times while in the air. Sorry, Taekwondo guys, but you know, you kind of do this kind of thing. So let's take that for an example. How many people in the world would be like really good at that? Like I can trust my life on the fact that if I land that kick, 360 spin, and I hit the guy in the head, he's going to get knocked out. That knife's not hitting me. A small fraction of the population, I think. That's not going to be like 50 million people that will be able to pull that off. So that would be one aspect. But let's take all those guys, right? So they're going to do that. Okay. So what are the odds when you fail, because even the best guys have a bad day or they miss sometimes. So what are the odds you being able to pull that off, the most complicated thing ever? When you look at a high stakes game that is somebody trying to stab you, as opposed to, I don't know, like maybe trying to take a step back, run away, or throw a chair at him, or heaven forbid that he does get the drop on you, that you pull back your stomach, you deflect, or you get out the way and then do a quick punch and get away. So in that regard, I would say like, okay, so doing something overly complex and that is highly unlikely to do, that's never going to work in the street. Never, again, being like very, very unlikely. So that would be what I think is a true statement in this case.
No, I would agree. So Robert Wallace in his mix, he goes, especially when there are CTV examples that show that it does. So if I was arguing against that, that's the argument I would use. So I'm sure you can find, well, I've seen them. I've seen videos of people throwing beautiful head-out roundhouse kicks and knocking the guy out cold. Right, but I would argue that just because that exceptionally talented individual managed to pull it off once, when it got captured, if you were making the statement never, I would still say it's closer to never than will always work.
Yeah. Okay, I'm trying to find a way to steelman this some more. I don't know if you see something, but I'm not seeing a lot of extra arguments to make, in favor.
No. I think that would be it. If I was arguing that something would never work, I would argue from the point is, and what I would mean by that is, this is highly unlikely to work for the vast majority of people.
Yeah.
And on that basis, I would say never, while it might not be strictly accurate, is not too far away from the truth. It does depend on what methods they're discussing, though, because as Chris mentions, I think sometimes that people can look at a drill, misunderstand the purpose of a drill.
Yeah.
Because I always say there's two kinds of drills, right? You've got drills that are like designed to develop a skill or an attribute. And then you've got drills that would accurately reflect how that skill or attribute would be applied in reality.
Yeah.
So, for example, like as a trapping drill, you might isolate the skill of trapping and do a whole series of live, semi-live trapping drills. And then people will go, yeah, but you'll never stand there toe to toe and go trap in a real fight. Well, that's true. You're not going to do that. So you could argue that would never work in a fight, you know what I mean? Because the way that it's presented in that drill isn't an accurate reflection. So if I was going to make that argument, I would say, well, your drill should be an accurate reflection of reality.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. So then we will get to, okay, so what is reality? And we have some more pet peeves from other people that I think will be, it'd be more interesting to talk about it then, but that's a really good point. If somebody sees like you doing a random technique completely out of context and they see that and they're like, I have no idea what this guy is doing. Now I get that a lot when I watch some other styles that I don't practice. I'm like, I have no idea what this guy is doing. When I was younger, I would have said that would never work. Being a little bit older and having got my ass kicked more than once, now I'm like, I don't understand. I don't practice this. I don't understand. I don't know why they're doing that. So it's not for me. Maybe it worked for somebody else. I don't know. So I would then say that if you take yourself out of the equation, like, okay, whatever you do, and then look at what is being presented and then say like, okay, so with my perspective on reality, my experience with violence and so on, would this work or not work? And I think in that regard, somebody, for instance, with a lot of experience and says that, okay, so this is just some general stuff, like what I think many people can agree upon. Keep fighting as simple as possible. Don't overcomplicate. You have to be committed to the techniques that you do. Timing, speed, precision, all that stuff matters, and like a bunch of those things. So that are generally, I think, accepted by the large majority of people who practice self-defense and martial arts. If that person sees something from their own experience that might be very, very, very large, they've been, I don't know, a bouncer for 30 years. They've seen it all. And they see me do a jump spinning back kick and say this is self-defense, and they can say that will never work in the street. They wouldn't be wrong from their perspective. because they never tried it, they never did it, they never trained for that stuff. They, like I said, they kept it simple. It was no nonsense. It was, I mean, you trained with Jeff Thompson, right? Okay.
Yes, yeah.
How many jump spinning back kicks did he do?
Not many.
So there you go. So if a guy like Jeff says, okay, this is bullshit, this doesn't work, I think you could it would be difficult for you to disagree with him. Like, what are you talking about? You don't know anything. Well, actually, he's got more experience fighting with people than most martial artists alive. So in that regard, I think it's also a true statement. Like, okay, somebody like that says, from my extensive experience and training and understanding and study, this doesn't work.
Yeah. Yes.
Right.
I think in the same way, you could say that the guy with an incredible, I mean, I'd like, for example, like for me, I would never try and do a shoulder throw if it was a serious situation, right? But I know judo guys who could do it in the sleep.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I may say from my perspective, that would never work. And I'd probably be right for the vast majority of people. But there always are those kind of exceptions. So we might be moving into the time to rip it apart.
Yes, let's just break it. Okay, so you go first.
So, well, I think as well that there is that. So I'd say I do think it is legitimate to say something probably has a high probability of failure. But I once said it in the dojo. I said, whenever someone says always or never, they're wrong. And then one of my students went, is that statement always correct? And I realized I created a paradox. But there are always exceptions, right?
Yeah.
I also think that sometimes when people say that would never work, which I think comes to a Tiger Jin's point, is what they're saying is, I don't understand the context of this, or I could not make this work. So for example, I know people who could never ever get any punch to work. They're the terrible punchers. So for them to say a cross would not work, well, that's ridiculous. Because what we'd acknowledge is, no, you do not have the ability to make it work. And I have heard things like that, I was out with my friends, I'd had 8 pints, I'd trained in whatever, I'd trained boxing for 3 months and I got beat up, so boxing doesn't work. You know what I mean? No. Yeah. Yeah. You could not. I think it was Seneca who said it, the mistakes of men, assuming something is impossible because you can't do it.
Yeah. Actually, Kelly Warden said something like that. And he said, never judge a technique by your inability to perform it. And I always like that because it kind of cuts down straight to the heart of it, which is you can't do this, right? And this is fine. This is not a critique of you, but you cannot do this technique. That doesn't mean that everything else, nobody else can do it, because you are just now assuming that you are the center of the martial arts and self-defense universe, where only the things that you can do can actually exist out there. So we're going to call you Ares, god of war, and we're going to build temples for you and worship you and listen to every single word you say, because you know what works and what nobody else ever in the history of mankind, in any conflict, whatever it was, wherever it was, could have done that resembles that technique. Not possible.
Yeah.
Not possible. You know that. Or not.
Yeah, I think there's a legitimacy, I think, to insert a bit, there is a legitimacy in, like you were saying about the risk-reward matrix there, there's a legitimacy to that. So, palm heels, simple punches, hooks, you know what I mean, would be at the higher end. And then you've got your turning back kicks and fancy throws and, all that kind of stuff. It doesn't mean it can't, ever work. But I think there is legitimacy on that one. But you do need to understand who's telling you they can't do it. Who are they saying it won't work for? Yep. So an extremely skilled guy that can get something to work, telling someone who doesn't have their attributes that it won't work is still legitimate, even though he can make it work. Yeah. And then, we've got the context with it. But on that point, you said the thing, I'll give an example of this, where I was personally humiliated. So for years and years and years, I'd said about the horizontal back fist. You flick the arm out and back. You see it in sports, karate a lot. As soon as I was in charge of our own syllabus, I just got rid of that. I thought it's a sports strike. It's weak. You can't get any power into it. It's good for tapping a point, and that's it. I was once training with a training partner of mine, and at the end of the session, he said, "Will you hold the pads for me? Because I want to do some back fists." And I kind of smiled. Like, yeah, okay. I held the pad. He threw a back fist in that pad. I could feel the front two knuckles go through the center of my palm, and it sounded like a shotgun going off. So do that again. Do that again. Every time he did it, my hand was in agony. You know what I mean? So I was like, show me that. Show me what. So I realized, right, when I've said to people that horizontal back fist doesn't work, what I'm saying is I'm really poor at this technique. I don't understand how it can generate impact. And I still stand by that for the vast majority of people, if you're throwing a back fist in that direction, throw a hook with the opposite hand, you'll get more bang for your buck. But I was definitely corrected with my statement of never. Because if Steve hit you with one of those, only it'd explode the side of your head.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And I've a bunch of techniques, or styles or stuff that I saw when I was younger, and I thought like that never works. And then you train with somebody who's really good at that, and you hurt all over. And it's like, I think I'm going to revise my opinion on this stuff because I can hardly walk right now, and my left arm is not really, I can't raise my arm anymore. I think this is one of the things that I notice also is, and we're kind of mixing several pet peeves and myths together, obviously automatically by this, is that a lot of people have made, there's two things I see. One of them is people have a lot of training in a specific art and very little in-depth knowledge of other arts and systems, in particular those from totally different continents, totally different times, and so on. Like, I have very little training in Japanese systems. You have a lot of training in them. And I'm like, I have some opinions that are based on very limited training. So if you say something about karate, I'm going to go like, okay, I guess it's true. I don't know. What I see people who practice karate do for, I have a way of interpreting that with the filters that I have for my own training. And that I can think like, oh, I like this, I don't like this, or I think this is great, or this don't really think it's all that great, or I'm like, no idea what they're doing.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that should be your default setting, but it takes maturity and time to get to that point where you can like get over yourself. I'm like, no, my style is the best, and I am the best, and get over that. As you get older, typically that becomes a little bit easier to do. And then just acknowledge that there might be people out there who A, can kick your ass, and B, just are really good at something that you don't understand. So that's the first part. And the other thing I also see a lot is a lot of people who are, for instance, training martial arts, maybe very much into a specific one or two or three, and then do a lot of looking online and looking at other styles and watching videos, instructional videos, video clips, and blah, blah, blah. And then kind of form their own theories on them and this and that, but they never actually train in them.
Yeah.
And they take snippets left and right and kind of, like, we call them people who, accumulate techniques, they collect techniques, kind of similar, but not exactly the same, but they just look at, and then there's a discussion with somebody from that style, and they can kind of, put up the pretense that they know what they're talking about because they can use a couple of specific terms, and I saw that guy do the so block left, yes, and then collapsing elbow, yes. Hey, you know about collapsing elbow? Yeah, sure, from that style. But in reality, it's I really like that expression that I once heard on a TV show. Your knowledge is a mile wide and an inch deep. And I think a lot of the issues stem from that, because we've got this constant flow of information available to us. Like, you can send me a video of somebody doing something related to karate. It might be kata, might be bunkai. It doesn't matter. And if you say to me that guy's really good, this guy is really, really good, I'll believe you. Especially if it looks good, and then somebody else sends me that clip and says about that guy, this is the worst karate practitioner ever. This is total nonsense. I can't believe how bad he is, and so on. I'm like, okay. I have no idea. I'm not going to judge. I have, like I said, we all have our filters, but you have to admit that you're not an expert at everything.
Yeah. No, I think that yeah, I would fully. I mean, I try like yourself to avoid that because I've seen that happen to me. You know, like for example, I'll put up a short, like YouTube is terrible for this. So I'll put up like a 5-minute clip aimed at people who understand the world I move in and understand what it is and understand its purpose and understand how it fits in the break team. And they go, yeah, I get it. And then you'll get someone who doesn't understand the context of it, which is back to Chris's point, really, who doesn't understand its purpose or how it fits in the wider framework. I always liken it to, like, if you went into like a boxing gym and you saw a boxer skipping, you could then say, well, why is he doing that? He's got his hands down by his side. You're not going to fight with your hands down by your side. Look at how he's bounced up and down. He's got no kind of stance at all. You're not going to skip in a fight. You know, you can take any single part of it. Why is he hitting the bag? He's not going to fight the bag. You know what I mean? When was the last time anyone fought a bag for a world championship? You know, you can take any part of it and away from the whole and critique it. So, and I think you need someone who understands how it fits into the whole, to understand whether it's got legitimacy or not. So I'm aware that when I often see things on the surface, I think that doesn't look right to me. Sometimes I have to kind of, okay, well, I need to know what that's for and what other training supports it and how it fits in the wider context, so I don't misinterpret its purpose, you know.
Yeah. Something else, one of the things Lauren Christensen told me once, and I really like that, is when somebody says that would never work, and he said that, how do you know? Were you there every single time somebody was attacked like that or tried to do that technique? You were there? Have you done like a statistical analysis all over the world throughout history, how many times this has been attempted and what the results were? I mean, and I think that's a good way to frame it as well. In like, again, you're not the center of the universe, no matter how much it feels like this is true. It's not, though.
Yeah,
it's not. And there will be people who are so much better than you, and a lot of them who will be worse. And there will have been people before you who could have eaten you alive. And there will be a bunch in the past that you would have been able to beat up, you know, with one hand tied behind your back. But that's not the point. Is that it's not just about you, and you don't know everything.
Yeah.
You don't see everything. I wrote an article a while ago about, you know, myths in self-defense and martial arts, and it's like high kicks don't work in the street. I've done them. Work just fine. I know a bunch of people who've done them. Now and then, like you said, all the caveats that come with that. But yeah, back at the time, I trained many hours a day. I didn't need to warm up to do high kicks. I was pretty fast. I'm a heavyweight, so by default, my legs are heavy. Blah 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 blah. The context and so on. Now at my age, with, you know, some of the injuries that I've had, I have to warm up to get my leg that high. So don't think that I will do that again ever. But I can't claim that they don't work, because they did work for me at a certain time. But I've changed.
Yeah. No, I would agree with that. I think the troll alarm at the back of my brain, thinking about how you and I could be quote mined.
Oh, yeah.
Just during this. So I think there's two extremes that would be false. So an individual who has made something work, claiming this will always work for everybody, is wrong. The person who hasn't made something work, claiming this will never work for anybody, is also wrong. I think somewhere in the middle of that, we can find techniques that are more likely to work for most people. Yeah. And I think that's where we need to go. But these extreme statements, like never, always, I think they need to be... do you know what I think it is? Well, martial artists, in my experience, like certain answers. Yeah. There's a security in certainty. I wrote an article a while ago called "It Depends" and Other Scary Things, because sometimes martial artists, you see martial arts movies, they've got the one move that never fails. Yeah. And that idea can be very reassuring. Or I practice the one art that can never be beaten. But I think once reality gets hold, and that's not how it's going to, you know, kind of play out, because you are not the best at everything. You are not the best example of the art. You are not an analog for the whole of humanity. There's lots of nuance to this.
True. Great. Yeah. Okay. I think we ripped that one apart pretty well. So let's move on to the next one. I've got Josh Pinchuk. Josh, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. What about the fact that many martial artists think their art is the best, rather than recognize that each might have benefits and deficits and no singular martial art is perfect? Okay, so how about steel manning this one?
Steel manning the idea that a given martial art can be perfect and nothing else is needed.
Yeah. That's why I'm letting you go first.
You know what? This is a fun exercise, but everything in me is going, I really don't want to say this. But I'm going to make the argument. If I was making that argument, I would think, why would anybody create a martial art that wasn't complete? It makes no sense to say, oh, we are the best at one particular element, when you acknowledge that fighting can include all kinds of elements. What you could do is you could say, well, my strength in this particular element will overwhelm those with skill in other elements. Therefore, mine is the best.
Yeah.
Because you could, so for example, if you were to say, you know, I am an extremely good puncher, most fights start at punching range, I will knock you out before anything else happens, therefore boxing is the best. I can clinch if I need to when it gets there. Or you can make the argument that, well, most fights are going to end up on the floor, and I can smother your striking skills, I can take your striking skills away from you. It doesn't matter if you're a better striker than me, because I can take you to the ground and win within that fight. So I personally would be able to rip those arguments to bits, but if I was making those arguments, that's the argument I would make. That martial arts, by definition, must have been designed to be complete. And therefore, if I can prove that this works and covers all the bases, then I'm good. I don't need to look at anything else.
I'm going to go a different route. I agree with what you said. I'm going to go a different route. So, if we are designing, this is the best martial art ever. Okay, I'm going to propose Tim Kennedy. So Tim Kennedy is an ex-UFC MMA fighter.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember if he ever had a title. So I'm going to see. I don't immediately have his track record here. I'm just looking him up. I don't remember if he ever became champion in his weight class or anything, but he was like one of the big name UFC fighters back in the day. So he knows how to fight in the cage. So MMA is pretty much all manners of striking is allowed. Punches, mm-hmm. elbows, knees, to the face, and pretty much not every target, but many of them. And I'll get back to that in a second. It's stand-up, it's clinching, it's striking while you stand up, it's up against the fence, it's clinching, throwing, and so on from there. All the takedowns and throws, and then all the ground fighting, grappling on the ground, including ground and pound and striking.
All tested live with full contact?
Yes. Yeah. Okay, so there's that. Now, Tim is also a special forces soldier. So he has the military training with weapons, with knives, with what have you. I think he went to Ranger school. So he has all that background as well. And if I'm not mistaken, he was deployed several times, but people fact check me on that because I'm not sure anymore. But he has extensive military training in martial arts. Now, if you look him up, I think his channel is Sheepdog Training or something along those lines. You can see him teaching people, and they're actually free rolling on the ground, doing grappling technique, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and wrestling type of techniques within the context of self-defense. Like, okay, there's a knife. Here's a knife. How do you handle that? Well, you're not going to do this rear naked choke on this guy, because he's going to start stabbing you and cutting you up because he's got two hands. And in those 6 seconds it takes for you to put him out, he might actually already have killed you. Not necessarily directly, but if he severs an artery, you're still bleeding out, and dying second isn't really a win. So your priorities change, the techniques change, and the way they perform their ground fighting is not the same as Tim used to do in the cage. And I've seen videos of him specifically showing like, okay, don't do it that way, because you need to be able to get back up. You need to be able to access your firearm. There might be a second guy. If I do this, then I won't be able to get back up in time, etc., etc., etc. So he has this huge range of possible fields of violence, specific niches of violence covered, from the combat sports arena, which we can divert towards self-defense, civilian self-defense, and so on, all the way up to war, which, if you back up a step a little bit, will bring you to lethal force and so on. So the use of force scale that he can traverse with his whole background and what he teaches. You know, Team Kennedy Do or Team Kennedy Fu or Ryu or whatever you want to call it. Okay, I'm going to claim that if you look from a very specific perspective, so not for everybody, from a very specific perspective, and that perspective is, if I wanted to create the ultimate martial art, and ultimate in the sense that it covers the most amount of ground.
Yeah.
Tim's your guy.
Yeah.
I rest my case.
Yeah, well, it's a good example. See, what you'll get there, of course, is the people who don't practice that system will make the similar arguments for whatever it is that they do.
Yeah. I don't know if we can still man it further than that.
No.
Okay, let's break it.
Well, I've got two kind of key points when you were talking there. I thought I'll have to scribble them down so I don't forget them, you see. So I think one of the things that, well, a lot of martial arts will have started off fairly broad-based, if you look at the historical ones. Invariably, this happens in all martial arts. Because you spend a lot of time training with practitioners of that system, they become insular and start to get specialized at fighting practitioners of that system. So boxers aim to fight other boxers, BJJ guys fight other BJJ guys, Thai boxers fight Thai boxers, karate guys fight karate guys, and get incredibly good at that. The negative of that is obviously it makes them specialists, but the upside of that is they become incredibly good at that specialized skill. So if I was to look at like old school karate, there is throwing within it, but if you go to a judo hall where they are training to out-throw throwers, and that's all they're doing, their throwing is developed to an incredibly high level. So if you're talking about the perfect martial art, I think there is an argument to say that it might be perfect in a given area, and if you're seeking that personal perfection, you're better also, there's always going to be areas of specialization. And as Josh says, you know, each art has its benefits and deficits. It depends on which area you're looking at. And the other thing I'd add to that is there's the issue of you need to define perfect. So I would never say that karate is the ultimate martial art for every single individual. What I can say is it's the one that I enjoy the most, that best fits my individual training needs. Yeah. So it's perfect-ish.
It's the perfect style for you. Yeah.
For me, yeah. Well, I wouldn't even say that. I would say it's perfect-ish. There's some, you know, because there's certain things I've tweaked and changed. But of all the ones I've done, it's the one that keeps my attention. It's the one that I really enjoy, and because I enjoy it, I keep doing it, and therefore I get better at it. Now, it may be that someone would suggest, well, this other art could be for you, but if it doesn't have that right flavor for me, I'm not going to be interested in practicing it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And kind of like the point you just said is when people, they train with their own kind of students within the same school all the time. That kind of changes things. I just signed up for a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class here, and obviously, you know, I've done a fair amount of grappling already, but not specifically that style. So I wanted to start over as a white belt again. And I'm in the white belt class, and obviously there's a bunch of people who've been training there for I don't know how long, but clearly a lot more experienced in that style of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu than I am. And my grappling is very varied. It's a mixed bag of a bunch of things. So and I'm there to learn. But then we're rolling and we're doing stuff, and I just do what I know. And at a certain point, I'm doing this kind of side choke. So where it's like an arm triangle, and I've got the guy, and I don't have it perfect, but I'm like, I'm not going to force it. I'm just going to chill out here and see what he does. And he's trying to get out of it, and I outweigh him, so he has a hard time. And at a certain point, he shifts a little bit, and I'm like, oh, he's getting closer to escaping. So and I had it like this, yeah. And he's in here, and I'm just resting on this arm here. I'm like, okay, I'm going to try to make you stop moving. And I put my hand on his forehead, and this on his forehead, and it turns into a neck crank. So he's now more limited. So anyway, after we finish the roll, the instructor said, well, actually, the rules of the blah, 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 BJJ Federation, I don't know what kind of format that they use, because I don't care about competition. And I said, the rules really don't allow that. You're not supposed to do that. But he says, over in here in my class, we're like, Yes, okay, somebody does something on you that they're not allowed to do according to the rules of the competition format that we follow. However, I want you to be able to deal with it, because
Yeah,
somebody might do that on you. You need to figure out how to work with that. And that's a huge different contrast with like, no, this is the only way we do this. And this is the
yeah,
perfect way to do this. And we always do this, we never do that. So, people narrow their field of vision because we're always training with people who do the same thing, as opposed to keep it open, which brings it then closer to perfect or best again. Because like
yeah.
for what we do, we don't care how you do that choke. You can put your hand on my forehead, and I will have a solution to that. Anyway, slightly diverting the conversation, but
Yeah, no, but I would agree with that, because that's the danger of always practicing with in an insular way. You can end up with big blind spots of things and never know you've done it. There is that balance between trying to be as holistic as possible and then acknowledging that will invariably mean you can't be an expert at everything.
yeah.
So for example, if you want to learn, if you want to learn great kicks, go to a Thai boxer or a Taekwondo practitioner. If you want to learn punching, a boxer's the best guy. If you want to learn throwing, go to a judo player. You know what I mean? They'll teach the best thing. But by that speciality, there's always that element that the chain is weaker in other parts. Yeah.
That brings me precisely to me tearing down Tim Kennedy now, because after putting him on a pedestal, and I really liked him. He seems like a very genuine guy and just really very much into what he's doing. So even he will admit that despite all his training experience as in his military career, is that he's not a specialist at everything. What typically what happens when you enter the service, which I did because it was mandatory back in the day, is that you go to some sort of boot camp, and whether it's Army, Navy, or whatever, you go somewhere and they give you your basic training, and then you start specializing.
Yeah.
Now you will be able to specialize to get to the point where he is like I think Army Ranger. I think he was, and whatever. You got to go to Ranger school, and you have to qualify for all this kind of stuff. It's a lot of training, a lot of practice, and so on. But that by default means you're not specializing in other things. That doesn't make him a Navy SEAL all of a sudden.
No.
An Army Ranger is not a Navy SEAL, and somebody who specializes in desert warfare is not specialized in Arctic warfare. It's not the same thing. Fighting in the mountains is not the same thing as fighting in a forest. And you go through specific training to do both. And what works in the one is going to get you killed in the other, and vice versa. And that's just two examples of a theater of war. It could be so much more. So despite all his training, I'm sure Tim will agree, well, those guys, they're specialized at this stuff. I don't do that. I'm sure he'll acknowledge that his brothers in arms who are, on a submarine will be able to fight a totally different fight than he can, and that he might. Yeah. I don't know if. Let's hope that he never did any training to become a bubblehead, but I think he would acknowledge that, and that's kind of my point. As much as you try to cover so much ground when it comes to violence, all the aspects of violence, whether it is armed, unarmed, when it's unarmed, all the tools that you might be able to use, all the different ranges. Then all the different weapons, then going all the way from just holding back somebody who's a little bit annoying at a party, all the way to going to war and kill or be killed. Within all those aspects, there's just such a diversity of specializations that you can go for, and they are mutually exclusive. Like you just said, you can't be an expert in everything.
No,
because you don't have enough time to become one. So that by default means that there's a limit to how perfect you can get that.
Yeah, no, I think that's the thing. Yeah, you're not going to be like my own personal mantra is I can't be an expert at everything, so I aim to be a beginner at nothing.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Yeah, so I want a little bit of skill in everything. So at least so I understand it. I acknowledge I've got that little bit of skill, and then the bits that really appeal to me, they're the bits I try and excel at. So it might be a perfect fit for me, but it doesn't mean that it's perfect.
Yeah. All right. I think we killed this one. Okay, so moving on to the next one. This is from Shizuma Kusanagi. Couple of pet peeves: treating military combatives as civilian self-defense. And I'm going to start with that one. So I wrote one of my most popular blog posts is the myth of military hand-to-hand combat. And I'll put a link in the show notes, and so I don't forget, I'm going to write that down immediately, in which I try to tear that one down immediately. But let's first steelman it. What do you think, Ian?
Right. So if I was going to make the argument that, well, okay, so by definition, military combatives is something that has a very defined purpose in arguably one of the most violent situations someone can find them in. It needs to be something with all the fat trimmed off. It can't be something that has any unnecessary techniques in it. And the fact that it will be tested within that kind of environment would mean that there'll be a good feedback loop through subsequent generations of training. If something's not working, they're not going to keep doing it. So you could say that the military techniques will be more tested. They have the money to invest in these programs. They have to be delivered quickly and efficiently towards the soldiers, and therefore are likely to have good crossover to civilian self-protection because of that no-nonsense, quick delivery, trimmed of all the fat nature of those systems.
I'll agree with that.
I don't believe a word I've just said.
No, I'll agree with that. And like you said, they're going to quote mine quote, us with this stuff. And then the only thing that I can say to that is that, guys, okay, the full recording and our full explanation of the nuances are readily available at, your podcast and mine.
Yeah.
But
I would say that, though. I would say there's some elements of truth to the things I've said
exactly.
there. I might not buy that full argument.
Well, I think it's true in the sense that I don't think you're going to see a lot of jump spinning back kicks in military combatives.
Outside of demonstrations, they do. You're right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't. Okay, let's 360 jump kicks. I don't think you're going to see a lot of them. Maybe in the Korean army when they do Taekwondo demonstrations, but other than that, like in the curriculum itself, it's highly unlikely that you're going to be seeing a lot of those, even if only because all the gear that you're wearing, you're going to have some really impressive jumping power to pull just a simple jumping kick off, let alone spinning. So I think in that regard, when it comes to war, you very quickly end up with techniques, like you said, that are stripped down of all the nonsense, anything that is just not immediately functional. You very quickly end up with what is supposed to work, which has the highest likelihood to work in whatever given context or whatever situation that the soldier might find himself in. And even that is an evolutionary process. So I'm going to try to steelman it some more. In contrast to many traditional martial arts, or even more modern self-defense systems, the military tends to evolve continuously.
Yeah.
Because they learn from battlefields and from war. They change tactics, and there are cycles, things coming back and things going away and so on, but they typically try to improve their tactics. Like they go to whatever, Afghanistan, Iraq, whatever, and they start waging war, and all of a sudden they run into IEDs, they run into ambushes that are specific to that location and that conflict. And even those will eventually change over time. I remember the first time I saw an ISIS drone that dropped like an explosive device. That was like, okay, this is new. They weren't doing that before. So you adapt accordingly. I'm not saying that the military is perfect at this. I'm not saying that the solutions that they come up with are always the best. I'm saying that they have a path to evolution.
They do.
Many martial arts and self-defense systems, in my opinion, don't have that same dynamic baked into their system. Like, we have to evolve.
Yeah. You don't get modern soldiers strapping on armor, getting on horseback, and arguing this is traditional.
No. Now, in kind of attacking that point, it took at the very least the First World War when there were just cavalry charges against machine gun fire and so on, and going after tanks. And I mean, Passendale here in Belgium, the corpses were stacked so high that, I mean, you don't want to know. For people who don't know, I can very much recommend Dan Carlin's Hardcore History
Yeah, I love that.
series about the First World War. He will explain in detail what happened, and that was like the transition from old warfare to modern warfare, when they're like, okay, so no more cavalry charges. I think they did another one in the Second World War, but I'm not sure anymore. But not as much. It's like, this doesn't work anymore. We need to change things. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and I would say just on that, just while I was thinking there as well, just to build on a couple of points. You could argue that in a typical martial art, there's an idea of reaching a point of perfection within that art. So it's aimed to be a lifetime's pursuit. So therefore, there is chance for fat and fluff to kind of build up. You could also make the argument that from a business model, some martial arts schools want to keep that student for the next 30 years as a relative income. The military systems say, I want this guy to be able to be out there doing it, getting it to work by the time he's finished his basic training. So that would be another argument you could make to say that it would be a better system in comparison to some of those out there.
Yeah, and I'll add to that as well, that, for instance, in the military, everybody's supposed to be able to fight, even the cook. And if you're not in a combat role, you go through basic training. Yeah. So that stuff needs to work on the lowest common denominator. Like the worst soldier in the whole army needs to be able to pull this off and fight. And maybe he dies in the first few seconds of combat, but he has the same training and he needs to be able to make it work.
Yeah. There's no recreational members of the military, or I've joined it to lose weight or meet friends.
No.
That you might get in other martial arts. They're there to do the job. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we did a good, a good effort in steel manning. Okay, let's break it down.
Almost convinced myself.
True.
Yeah, it's just dangerously swim. You're gonna have me deleting videos and rewriting them.
Okay, so now let's rip it apart. So why is this complete nonsense that military combatives are so great at for self-defense?
I'd begin by just saying it's an entirely different context with an entirely different set of objectives and an entirely different set of rules. So what a fit soldier will do within the context of military doesn't mean that's the ideal thing for a 15-year-old girl to do to keep herself safe with living in a civilian context. There's different rules apply. You've got different objectives that apply. You haven't got the kit, you haven't got the weaponry, you haven't got the training. But above all else, it's an entirely different context. You're not looking to kill an enemy or achieve a mission. You're looking to keep yourself safe from violent criminals.
Okay, I'm going to refer to my article about the myth of military hand-to-hand combat. Point is this: so first off, ask soldiers, past and present, how much hand-to-hand combat training they get.
Yeah,
ask them. Okay, and before you ask them, write down a number. Like, okay, so for during training, how many hours do they get? Fine. So then ask them after they go into whatever unit, so they finish basic training, and then soldiers keep on training. They don't just stop training. They keep on training throughout their career, and also specifically when you are deployed, it's not that, well, no, now I'm in my war zone, so I don't have to train anymore. Don't have to do anything anymore. No. It keeps going. How many hours a week do they work on hand-to-hand combat? I asked soldiers that for that article. I said, one of the guys that I know who was in Afghanistan and did, his job was shooting people and making sure that they don't get up anymore. 2 hours a week at best, because they've got so much other stuff that they have to do. It's like 60 to 80 hour week, and they've got so much other stuff that they need to keep on doing. People have no idea how the military works in real life. They've seen too much movies.
No, I'm surprised it's that much.
Yeah, that was him. Other people said like, never. Basic training, and that was it. We didn't get anything else anymore. We got other training because that was our specialty, but like, no. So I'm like, okay, so military hand-to-hand combat is not necessarily something that is trained extensively by the soldiers. And the other point that I want to bring up, which I think is very, very important, one of my mentors was a ex special forces, really interesting guy, and he was on a forum that I was as well. That's where we met, and everybody was going about hand-to-hand combat, blah blah blah, and he's like, "Shut the fuck up, everybody! Soldiers fight in teams. We don't fight alone, barring exceptions. Yes, there are special missions. Yes, there are people who specialize in that. But the average soldier does not fight alone. So while you're doing your whatever hand-to-hand combat thing, the enemy, who's also fighting as a team, his buddy is going to come over and shoot you, and you're done. So that's the first thing. So it's a team activity.
Yeah.
It's called small unit tactics, for instance. They don't fight alone. So if you engage one person hand to hand, by default, you are stuck. You have to face this one person. And there might be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a bunch of other guys just around the corner while you're doing your whatever thing. So that's one aspect of it. And the other is that they're not there to fight hand to hand. Again, yes, I know certain missions. Yes, I know. But on average, the point is to convert the enemy from living to dead.
Yeah.
So what do you use for that? What special moves? No. You've got your rifle, and then if that one malfunctions, you've got your sidearm.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason that one doesn't work, you've got a knife or something else.
It's all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
All kinds of stuff, and all the way down the bottom of all the options that you choose, there's hand-to-hand combat. Yeah. So by the time you get to that, you messed up so bad. Everything's gone so terribly wrong that you have to resort to that. The odds of you surviving that one are really, really low. It's looking bad for our hero.
Yeah.
It's not Rambo. It's not like that. So the whole idea that the military trains hand-to-hand combat, like this is the best thing ever. No, this is like everything is messed up. You are forced to go hand-to-hand with the enemy. You're likely going to die. Yeah. But we have to give you something. You don't give up. So you're still going to try. But this is by far not the first choice. By far.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I would agree with that. Because it tends to be marketing as well. You know, people associate those military units with very tough, very able, combat grizzled veterans. And therefore, I think they can use it to market their the training. But as you say, it's entirely different context.
Yeah, and a lot of that stuff doesn't apply. We can argue. I would say historically, the military is good at war. I think that's kind of the purpose of armies. Recent history, and I'm talking about the last few decades, maybe a little bit longer still. Armies have converted a little bit also more to peacekeeping forces, and it's changed, but still the primary, focus is still on war. As a civilian, you do not have these, you're not allowed to act in the same way. No. Military law and civilian law is very much at odds. So lethal self-defense, where you use lethal force on somebody attacking you and claim it's self-defense, is very, very strict. And usually well-defined in the sense that you have a lot of limitations. The rules of engagement in war might be totally different. It might be that, again, I'm a little bit of hyperbole on my part, but it might be like shoot on sight, basically, like as soon as you hit the ground, start running, anything you see, you shoot it. I'm exaggerating, but that is almost never the case in civilian self-defense. Yeah. Like the first person you see, kill him. That is not self-defense. I would actually struggle to find a scenario in which like that would be the rule for a civilian. I don't see it right away, but maybe we can come up with a zombie apocalypse scenario. So I would say that a lot of what you see in military hand-to-hand is just like you have to filter that through the legal perspective when it comes to self-defense. And I'm not even talking about how efficient it is, how would it work. No, I'm just talking about the end goal. Yeah. The end goal is just to kill that guy as quickly as possible so you can reload and keep fighting. That's not necessarily compatible with civilian self-defense.
No, I would agree and see that there's a major difference. I think as well that there is sometimes an appeal to the kind of the prurient with the level of violence some of these systems kind of demonstrate as well, so there's a certain type of person was that's just so badass. I got the knife and I slashed him across the throat and I drove it through his eyeball, and almost, it's presented as this extreme system that would have no bearing on it in a civilized world, even if it did work, because you're held legally accountable for your actions, and that needs to be accounted into whatever's going to be an effective solution. I would say the game for self-protection is to avoid harm, physical and legal. So you can't have something that achieves one without the other.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we tore that one down, more than well enough.
I'm glad, because we were starting to sound a bit too convincing in the first half.
Well, I like what you said before when you said that, well, there are elements of truth in the way you steelman the argument. And I think that's the point, is when we try to do this, is that even if we don't agree with everything, some of the things that we say when we steelman it are actually true.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that pet peeve or that myth is correct. It just means
that
the filter through which you look at it can get you to a truth.
Yeah, I mean, not to go over that one again, but for example, it is true that if they're only doing 2 hours a week, you know what I mean, they're not going to be spending a lot of time on spinning hook kicks.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So the fact it's stripped down is probably true, but you're right. I think sometimes people can point to a partial truth and then extrapolate it. You know what I mean, or an element, and you do have to look at the big picture with it. So. Yeah.
I'll quickly add something on that one. So there are competitions for sharpshooters out there, especially in the US. And what you see is that then you've got the special forces sharpshooters and so on, snipers that are, and I know sharpshooter and sniper is not the same thing. I know, people, relax. So they have these competitions, and you see that in, not always, but it definitely happens that civilians beat those special forces guys. And the reason is very simple. Once again, that those civilians, that's all they do.
Yeah.
The shooting, it's all they do. A sniper, very, very different. He has to go behind enemy lines, is in a mission, has to be able to lie still for hours on end, has to be able to all the things and so on. Has to be able to handle the stress, has to be able to get out of that situation again, and so on, make his rendezvous, or they're going to leave him behind. So very different skill sets, as opposed to somebody, only thing they do is, 3, 4, 5 times a week, they go to the range, they take their rifle with them, and they practice. And that's all they do. Those skills are irrelevant. Who do you want to take to war? I will take the special forces guy. I will not take the civilian who might be able to hit the target from, 100 meters out extra over the military guy, but I know who I'm going to trust. And then we get to what is, I think, critical. The difference is that it's the mindset. The mindset of soldiers, special forces or not, doesn't matter, is radically different from a civilian who doesn't go through that training. And that's where the lethality, I think, often comes from, is that, sure, he might not have the most polished techniques, but he's going to come at you with this kind of commitment you've never seen before, especially a combat veteran.
Are definitely embedded, aren't they?
Yeah. All right, moving on. So, Michael B. Martial Artists, his pet peeve, 90% of fights go to the ground. Will you be able to steelman that one or not? Because I'm going to have a hard time.
It's difficult, but okay, let's go. Like, if a fight goes on long enough, human beings are inherently unstable. We've got a high center of gravity. We've got a very long, small base. So I think you could make the case that if two people fight, at some point they're going to get hold of one another, and at some point there's a good chance they would fall to the ground.
Okay.
So I think you could make it. Well, okay, if I was going to make the best possible argument, I would say it's a default position when two human beings fight. If two human beings fight for long enough, they will eventually clinch. When they clinch, we've got strong opposable thumbs. We're going to get locked hold at one another. We are inherently unstable creatures. So at some point, we're going to go up the floor, especially with someone skilled at taking you to the floor. So I think any fight that runs on long enough will go to the ground.
It's a good point. I'll add to that something else, is that when two unskilled people fight, there's a high likelihood that it will go to the ground because, like you said, they're unstable and they are untrained. So they don't know what they're doing. They overextend, they lunge into techniques, they lean when they shouldn't, or they have really bad footwork. and so on. And then I'm not even taking into account that there's an environment that you might not be on a coaching floor, that there's so many ways to trip and fall and end up to the ground. And that's not even taking into account the other guy trying to get you there on purpose or otherwise. Is that it's extremely likely that people will fall. And you see that when somebody does sports where there's a lot of changing of direction and so on, most people fall over in the beginning because they don't have that control, and that's without there being any actual conflict, without somebody actually trying to put you on the ground. So imagine that you don't know how to fight, the other guy doesn't know how to fight, but you're just wailing in on each other, and you crash and you end up clinching, and there's pulling and pushing, and you make a wrong move, and there you go. And I think that's extremely likely. So I think if we combine these two with your argument, then we might get close to 90%.
Yeah. If you add in the physics and the human the psychology,
I think the odds are really high that somebody's going to go to the ground.
Yeah.
If not both people, likely one person. Even if that means that there's a knockout and somebody's lying on the ground. Yeah, that's true. I suppose it's like, is it a fight at that point, or is the fight over? But if we assume it's still a fight while somebody's swinging punches, I would say
if one person's down and one person's up, part of that fight went to the ground.
Yeah. if we find that the other guy is still moving, so he throws that big knockout punch, his opponent falls to the ground, he's on the ground, and the guy is still recovering to his fighting stance. But technically the fight is still on.
Kicking him when he's down, we'll count that. Yeah, we're up there. We've done it.
Yep. So I don't want to steelman this any further. Okay, let's break this down. Let's choke out this myth.
Yeah, well, I mean, for the first thing is they just don't. That's the first thing. I mean, you just see enough of them. Some do. A good percentage might end up there, but the generally just don't. I know it's used as a statistic to promote the benefits of ground fighting. The vast majority will start with people in an upright position. So therefore, you can't just say, well, I'll ignore that phase of it and I'll just deal with the ones that do go towards the floor. There's all the things about vulnerability to third parties, the vulnerabilities of weapons. A lot of these statistics come from police forces where getting the guy face down to handcuff him is a very good idea. It's part of their procedure. So they deliberately attempt to take people down to the ground in a way that you wouldn't if it was two civilians or two or more civilians. So I think it's not a great statistic.
Yeah, and I actually wrote about that one many years ago, and I think it was Horian Gracie who claimed in a Playboy article in 1980s that it was like 90% of or X amount of percent of all the fights go to the ground, and from what I see, he was quoting actually an LAPD study.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
and the thing is that if you go looking at that study, it doesn't say all the fights go to the ground. It's just that eventually they end up there.
Yeah.
One of the reasons, and it gets more complex than that, and there have been follow-up studies that come up with even more nuance. So I'm not going to go too deep into that, but one of the reasons why the LAPD study found that is that one of the basic cuffing procedures is that you cuff somebody when they're on the ground.
Yeah,
it's easier to cuff somebody. You have to control somebody. It could be up against a wall, could be up against a car, whatever, but the ground is always there. You won't always have a suitable wall or car. So typically what officers will tend to do is that if there's a struggle that, and they can control the guy and they make him fall or he falls, they will by default, continue to finish the cuffing procedure as the guy's on the ground. Or if they do end up on the ground or whatever, they will do it there. Or if they hit the guy and he falls and they immediately pile on top of him, well, you could say that technically they started ground fighting, but no, it's just that the point of a police officer who's arresting somebody who resists arrest is not to have a fair fight. It's to get him into cuffs as quickly and as efficiently as possible. If that means that they will use 5 police officers on top of you to do that, that's what it means. If there's only one of them, it's going to be that one guy. But if there's 2, there's going to be 2 on top of you. So yes, then technically all 3 people were fighting on the ground. So it starts there, and then it goes into, you know, again, there's more nuance than that, but
Yeah,
I think that's what started that whole myth.
Even in with the civilian context as well, it's not the same kind of fight.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like two people end up on the ground and then start to put on ankle locks on one another. Do you know what I mean? You know, there'll be friends trying to kick you. One of them will be trying to scramble to get up. You know, I mean, I've seen that. You know, you'll have two people that will fall, but then they don't go, okay, we're on the ground now, let's stay here. One or more instantly start to try and rise themselves back up again, where they feel more happy, you know, punching, kicking, where they feel less vulnerable to other people being around as well. So, you know, it's a statistic with an element of truth, but I think you need to look at what's your objective. If you're saying that you should only train for ground fighting because that covers 90% of situations, that's a false statement.
Yeah. Somebody asked me that, you know, well, you just started, you know, with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So has your opinion on ground fighting changed? I'm like, hold on. I've been doing ground fighting and grappling for many, many decades, just not this specific style. My opinion did not come out of thin air. I started my journey with judo and jiu-jitsu when I was 14 years old. That's many years ago. So I have nothing against ground fighting, in particular Brazilian jiu-jitsu, which I think is awesome in what it does. But it applies and it works really well in certain circumstances. But it doesn't work at all, or is, in my opinion, very much counterproductive to try it in other circumstances and contexts, just like any other art.
Yeah, I would agree.
We just talked about like high kicks. Can they work? Yes, but given a certain context. Like I said, I pulled that off. A bunch of other people I know pulled that off. I'm sure there's loads more who say that high kicks do work in the street for me. However, and then we get to the caveats, and the same applies to grappling arts. Is that yes, where in the arena, in certain aspects of the arena of violence, they work really well, but in others, it's suicide. I could show you video after video. I've got one that I have some on file somewhere, and it was in Brazil actually. There's two guys fighting. There's a third one kind of hanging by, and it goes to the ground, and one guy is starting to get beat up, and the third guy grabs his knife and stabs the guy who was winning a little bit too much and beating up his friend. Like, what do you do then? And even Tim Kennedy, I think, hasn't found a way to make Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or ground fighting, grappling as we just define it, work against multiple opponents with edged weapons.
No,
if he has, I haven't seen
it. That video, I know exactly what you mean. I actually used it. I made it grainy and black and white because it is quite graphic.
Yeah.
But I did a video called Multiple Opponents and Inconvenient Truth. And I've got lots of footage of, and on that one, if you watch the bit of footage you're talking about, the guy who does the takedown, successfully takes the guy down the ground, is the one who then gets his wrist slashed and repeatedly stabbed.
Yeah.
But before people think we've been too heavy on BJJ, I would agree with you. That's the same as anything else. I spend lots of time working on various kicking drills, footwork drills that are specifically designed for one fighting context that I would never dream of using outside of that context. I think, as you say, it's an issue that applies to all arts. I do feel that because of ground fighting can be so successful in that one-on-one context, one-on-one consensual context. People are quick to extrapolate that it must be wonderful for all others. Whereas I think maybe that's why it gets singled out that little bit. I don't know, but
I think we also come close to what we discussed before, with people think like this is the best martial art, or this is the best martial art for me, and that if that happens to be grappling, then they're like, yeah, this is the best thing ever, and look how this and that. I mean, the teacher in the BJJ school I went to and we rolled at the end. I'm a heavyweight, and he's like, I don't know, maybe 70, 75 kilos. So I don't know how many pounds that is, but that would be relatively light. It's a huge gap in weight class between us. I managed to threaten him a few times with some of my attacks, and I got him into Kesagatame. He's a black belt. He has hundreds of BJJ competitions under his belt. He's really, really good. So I was unable to finish him, and so it's choke or submit, no way. And he basically blocked everything I did with technique, not strength. So despite the difference in weight and strength, he was easily able to manage the role that we did. And it was friendly, but still, you know, I was trying to submit him. He had no problem with me. And when he attacked me, I was toast. So like in his game, he was really, really, really good. So if we stay within that context, you know, he is the best. He's a better man. There's no denying that. So, and I want to emphasize that when you look at grappling arts that focus on this specific part, this specific aspect of violence and fighting and so on, they're really good at that. That's why they specialize in it. I don't think we will say that. Okay, jiu-jitsu, classical jiu-jitsu. I don't think we can make an honest argument that they have the best punching techniques ever. Put a classical jiu-jitsu guy in a boxing ring and he's going to eat that boxer alive with punches alone. I don't think that that's a tenable argument.
No,
because they specialize in different things.
Yeah.
And I think you have to be able to acknowledge that. I think that's an important aspect of just practicing, is that you see like, okay, this thing works really great here, but over there, not so much. I don't see any carpenter, and you're an electrician, so you know this. It's like, I'm going to use, I don't know any tools that an electrician uses.
Well, the example I always use, run with your analogy, I always say is, no one would criticize a paintbrush because it wasn't able to knock nails in. You know, we acknowledge it has a specific purpose and is brilliant for that purpose.
Yeah.
You know. So, I think a lot of art and systems or subgroups within those systems. There's one thing on that as well. I always like Jamie Clubb's analogy for this, where he said, if you talk about the self-defense side of it, goes, it's a life skill, a little bit like akin to first aid. So all medical practitioners get taught in first aid, and then they go off to specialize, like we've been talking about. So you get a guy who's a brain surgeon and a guy who's a heart surgeon. So you could be the brain surgeon of groundwork or the heart surgeon of kicking, whatever it is that floats your boat. But when it comes to first aid, the brain surgeon doesn't do his brain surgery. That guy's choking, he goes back to his first aid skills. Yeah. So it's wonderful in the martial arts. We kind of agree what self-defense needs. We all get that in place, and then we're free to practice everything else we want to do without the judgment of whether it fits in the first aid box or not.
Yeah, another thing, I mean, like I just said before, I think it boils down to people falling in love with their art and thinking it's the best thing ever. It's kind of backwards thinking when I contrast it with one of my friends who is ex-law enforcement now, but he has spent the whole career in law enforcement, and he says the mission comes first. The tools you acquire those once you establish what the mission is. So it's not like I've got this wonderful sword here. It's the best sword ever. It is the sharpest in the world. It is the fastest to wield. Nobody has a better sword than me. And then you're going to go, I don't know, go fight in a war where everybody's using machine guns and so on. And you're like trying to get the bullets and hit them out of the air. It's like, it doesn't make sense. The tool might be perfect, but it is not the tool that counts. It's the mission that comes first. Yeah. What are the parameters of the mission? When it's self-defense, okay, so what are the parameters of me defending myself? What is your mission? My mission? You go out the house, get home in one piece, stay alive, and go back to your life. That's the mission. What do I need for that? Well, then we can start looking at specifics, like where do I live? What kind of violence and crime am I most likely to encounter? And you work from there, as opposed to like, okay, what are the tools that I have right here? Right, boxing. Okay, boxing it is. Best thing ever. I wrote a book, Boxing for Self-Defense. I love boxing. Yeah. You will never hear me say that it's the best thing for self-defense ever, because that's not true. It's really good at certain things that it does. Punching, really good at it. Kicking, not so much. Grappling, not so much. And folks, don't start talking about old school boxing from 100 years ago. I don't care. We're talking about boxing right now. And even then, yes, they did grapple. They didn't grapple like the grappling arts did. You're lying.
No.
They didn't.
Yeah.
They were boxing. Yeah. So, okay, that's it. That was a mini rant.
Yeah, no, I was just going to wholeheartedly express my unequivocal support of the point you've just made. The way I always express it is the goal will determine the strategy will determine the tactics will determine the choice of technique. So when the goal changes, everything else changes.
Yes.
And you're right, the most martial artists go, I have this pre-existing solution, how do I apply it to the problem? And it should be the other way around. So is your goal to win the boxing match? Right, this is how we're going to do it. Is your goal self-defense? This is how we're going to do it. You know, you've always got to start the goal and work back. And it's that determines whether something's appropriate. It's not a value judgment. It's whether it's appropriate or not.
I'm going to try to bring it back to something that everybody will understand now. So let's bring it back to business. We've had a year and a half, pretty much, of a pandemic on our hands. All the companies that were in the entertainment sector, they were bleeding. A lot of them are gone now. All the people who are, for instance, and Belgium is a concert country. We have festivals like you wouldn't believe, like the biggest names come to Belgium. Weird, but it's true. U2 got their big start over here. A bunch of really big names came to do small concerts first here, and then Torad Werchter, we've got a bunch of them. So there's a whole industry of building stages. What were these people doing? Nothing during the pandemic. They couldn't work. So all the companies that have a mission, and that mission is like, we build stages and sound stage and this and that, we do all that kind of stuff. They're like, we're not allowed to work anymore. We are irrelevant. So they had to switch and do other things. And then one guy, what he did is he became a mason, and his boss started, you know, putting him to work in totally different areas where there was some overlap with the skills that they already had. They're manual laborers. They know how to do certain things, or build scaffolding. I mean, all sorts of stuff that like, how can we as a company survive, which is a total switch of the mission statement, which was before, like, we want to be the best stage building company in the world and want to do all the concerts. And now it's like, we don't want to go bankrupt. What can we do? Mission changes. Everything changes, just like you said. So if people can understand that, because they probably have experience now, like, this is how I used to work. And all of a sudden I had to switch from doing personal training to doing everything online. Like that, one day to the next. It's like, freak out, and I managed it. I'm sure, I mean, you had to make a bunch of changes too. So everybody will have experienced that. Okay, apply this now, the same logic to grappling is the best thing since ever. Okay, I hope we made that point clear.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
All right, moving on.
Yeah.
Okay, let me see. So 95%, blah, blah, blah. You know what? We've been going for a while. We picked a few that we absolutely wanted to do. So I'm going to start with that one, and we'll see what we do afterwards. Maybe do a second.
I know you've got a hard finish within about 20 minutes, you told me as well. So
yeah, I got to go pick up my car. And I really need it.
Me too. Mine's in the shop today as well. There you go.
Yeah, I'm gonna rant if I talk about my car, so I'm not gonna do that. Okay, so Rob O'Neill. Rob says, as you are a personal trainer and Iain was a qualified fitness instructor, the fact that most martial arts instructors aren't qualified to carry out fitness training, but do anyway, is a peeve of mine. I'd be interested to hear you discuss. Right, okay. So we talked a little bit about beforehand, so maybe Iain, I'll let you start.
Do you want me to strawman the argument, steelman the argument first?
Yes.
Yeah. So if I was to argue that one, I would say that, you know, the idea of martial arts instructors giving out fitness training advice, that martial arts instructor has a lot of experience of the specifics of that martial art. And to be an instructor, he's obviously been relatively successful in developing his skills, and is therefore probably better placed to be able to advise on the specific fitness training you need to do for that martial art than someone who has generic qualifications in overall fitness. So the personal trainer at the gym may know a lot about health and fitness and getting ready for the beach in summer. They might not know a lot about the attributes that specifically that martial art requires, and therefore the martial arts instructor may be better positioned in order to give specific advice for the martial art they practice. That would be my best shot at the argument in support of that.
I'm going to try to go further, and we talked a little bit about this beforehand, so maybe you might be able to help me out with that. But there's a saying in Chinese martial arts is that, you know, training without any gung training, so strength training, even until old age, is all for naught, which means that if you just do the forms and your techniques, it's not enough. You need to develop some sort of conditioning with it. Now, true, many arts have conditioning methods. Mine has, I'm sure yours has too. If you talk to what many people know, I think it's Goju-ryu, know all the different attributes to do for strength training.
Yeah. The big iron rings and the
The
weighted
iron
jars
rings.
and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So that, a lot of that is conditioning. It's like the big jars, it's a grip strength. And I mean, ask one of those guys who's been doing that for 20 years just to grab you and just like claw and pinch down on you. You're going to squeal because it's going to hurt, because they're going to have tremendous grip strength. So many arts have specific conditioning methods. And in many ways, I think because they focus on their own system, they don't do conditioning for other systems, it's for their system. They develop methods and methodologies that are specific to their art to optimize the techniques that you do. For instance, there's many arts in which you do, let's say, a lot of low stances. Okay, you have to develop a specific kind of flexibility. You have to develop a specific kind of strength, and you train that. For instance, in the style that I used to do, we did a lot of horse stance stuff. We did a lot of training staying in a horse stance for a long time. And you develop a specific kind of strength that is associated with that kind of training that you then use to make your techniques the best way possible, to perform them the best possible way. Which, if you look at it from just a personal trainer perspective who just knows about strength training and so on, generic, just what we would look at in Western science, he will have very little experience with the specifics of that art, like you said. So he's going to be able to give you general training advice, but not specific to your art. Your teacher probably will be able to give you that specific training better than any other trainer. So I think in that regard, I think the fitness advice that he gives, if it's focused on the specific art, there's a high likelihood that he will be the only person you need to ask, or somebody who also teaches that style, as opposed to whatever personal trainer in whatever gym you go to, who's just finished his 3-month course that he did, and it's his first day on the job. And even what he knows might be really accurate. It might be correct for what he can teach you, but that is not specific to your art.
Yep.
Okay, that's the best I've got.
I think that's a pretty good one.
Okay, go ahead.
If we were to start ripping it,
yes, please.
If we start going the other way, I would say if we take the specific tools that the karate has, the weighted jars, all that kind of stuff, and then you could make the argument, well, they were specifically designed to go along with this art. My counter argument to that would be, no, that was the best they had at the time. Right, so and since then, with the development of modern kit, modern sports science, if they had access to that information, they may do things very differently today. Just because it was done then doesn't mean it's the best thing to do now.
Yeah. So for folks who don't know, I'm a personal trainer for 27 years. That's my full-time job. So I've done a lot of training, studying, and so on, and a lot of experience with physical training, teaching people about fitness and conditioning and so on. Some of the biggest nonsense I've ever seen in that regard has come from the martial arts. So nonsense, not only that, but also extremely counterproductive and dangerous. Like I've told a story before, but this teenage girl who was forced to do piggyback with someone, and they would do a lot of running around, jumping and so on. And she jumped up with an adult on her back and just ripped her knees, just completely shredded. And it's like, done, no sports ever again. That was my doctor told me that when he's a sports physician, and he said that that was what happened. I'm like, yeah. And I can tell you, like, a teenage girl, you do not want to have a teenage girl carrying a grown adult man and then have her running around. First of all, because the skeleton of the musculoskeletal system of women is different from that from men, and the way the angles of the hips and the femurs and so on, if they have a certain type of knees, the odds of their knees just tearing apart under that load are tremendously high. And it's not about willpower, it's just mechanics. It's just, I mean, that teacher is an idiot, to put it mildly. So a lot of the stuff that I've seen, and I've seen a bunch more, and I've done a bunch more when I was younger, was some of the old school training. A lot of it was counterproductive, to put it mildly, and the source of many of my injuries I have today. And I'm by far not alone in that regard. And like you said, and I think that's a really valid point, is that That was what they had in the day with what they thought was good for conditioning and what they saw would deliver certain results. Now, I'll give as a response to that something that one of the teachers that I had said is that, okay, so exercise. What is exercise? One of the ways is lifting weights, strength training. Okay, so I can give you, I don't know, my microphone that's standing here that weighs about a pound, and I can tell you, Ian, could you put it down on the floor and then pick it up and push it overhead? Sure, Wim, I can do that. Okay, I'll ask you, could you do that like 50 times, please? And you'll do that, and you'll have had a workout. It will officially qualify as conditioning. Is that efficient? No. Is that the best way to train your shoulders? Not at all. So it's crappy technique and it's counterproductive. But if you do that regularly for years, you will get a training result. You will be, in my opinion, marginally better, but you still will be better in those muscles and with that movement than if you didn't do it. However, that is a far cry from this being the best training that you could do. So, and that's the big thing, is that we've come a long way in training, and there's a lot of stuff that modern science understands better. Even, I mean, from back when I started, things that we thought were true, we know now that they are not. And this is how science actually works. It's a process. It's not an end state. And back then they had what they had. However, there's a lot of stuff that is just, we know that it doesn't work like that. It's stupid, it's wrong, and it will get you injured. Now, that's one thing. And I'll give a caveat, and I always use that one because it's so much fun to give. Virgin boy eggs. Look it up, people. Virgin boy eggs in China. What they do, and this is the same culture that your Kung Fu conditioning techniques come from, using the same mindset, yin yang, and all that kind of stuff, and energy, using the same rationale that they use for the conditioning and all the other stuff that you do in your style. And this is coming from a guy who spent decades doing Chinese martial arts, right? So if you're going to say that this is awesome, virgin boy eggs, okay, I want to see you eat them. I want you to make a YouTube video or Instagram video showing you eating virgin boy eggs. I'm kidding. People don't do that. Okay. So the point is that you have to take it all, or you have to admit that maybe there's something wrong. So if you look at the entire culture, you'll notice that, well, this is really, maybe that's not a great idea. Because we know that this is complete and utter nonsense. So maybe the other stuff that is based on the same philosophies and insights they had at the time is also problematic. And then a final point that I want to make is that you have to understand the mindset of many centuries ago. There's a friend of mine who's a historian and a martial artist, and he showed me this picture. It's really fun. And he saw, it was sailors on deck of whatever boat that was going to conquer, or whatever country, I forget. And they were doing exercise. And you see a lot of the global stuff and that people are reinventing and discovering again, with a lot of nonsense that they don't know what they're talking about, but I digress. And you see guys doing looks like gymnastics, doing what's that called? Is it the horse? Where they just kind of vault over and this and that in gymnastics.
Oh, yeah.
I don't
in gymnastics, vaulting horse. Yeah.
I don't know the names in English. I know them in Dutch, but anyway,
same,
guys. And there's a guy doing a handstand on one hand and with his legs all vertical and this and that. And that's a regular sailor. That's not his job. That's just a regular sailor, right? So, and everybody like, wow. I mean, if for the martial artists out there who haven't done gymnastics at that level, give it a try. Yeah. See how far you get. And this is on a boat. A boat is not a stable surface. It moves around. So, and the point is this, that was considered like part of the job. So you have to be able to do all this stuff. You have to be strong, balanced, because you're basically a colonizing force or a conquering force. So you have to train while you are en route towards the whatever lands that you're going to colonize, conquer, and so on. Here's the thing though. If those guys would have lived to be 60 or 70, they would have been crippled.
Yeah.
Because that kind of training done that way, on top of everything else they need to do, which was hard manual labor and fighting and injuries and so on, is you would be riddled with arthritis even long before that age. There's skeletons that they dug up from whatever battle in the Middle Ages that you could see that the archers, the forearms were just completely malformed due to the pressure of always pulling down, I don't know how many 100-pound bows. It's just that, so they must have been in horrible pain if they survived those battles. because that kind of training, constantly doing that, it's going to wreck you. So if you look at historical manuscript and historical training methods for conditioning, and you're like, yeah, but back in 200 years ago in Japan, that's how they trained. Yes, they did, but they didn't expect to live 80 and be functional and be able to walk or wipe their own ass. It was not possible. I'm slightly exaggerating, but you get the point. It's that people take this fraction and like, this is the best thing ever for conditioning. Yes, but look at everything else that was also true in the era where they developed this. And if we look at the training methods that we use now, 200 years from now, they're going to look at like those idiots from 2021 that didn't know what the hell they were doing, wrecking their bodies like that. So, okay, that was it. That was my big rant.
Yeah, no, but it changes that quickly as well. I mean, like I said, years ago, I did do my the qualification for that weightlifting coach and all that kind of stuff. But I acknowledge it's way out of date. Things move on, and what's best practice changes like with year on year. Yeah. The other thing that I've got with this one as well, that was a slight thing that we talked about beforehand, is that I think when you're talking about like that supplementary training, you need to know about the individual and any issues they've got, what they can realistically fit into their own lifestyle, what their own specific objectives are. So I think sometimes what you see is, I get this a lot. If I put a video of or a photograph describing the training I've done that day, people go, "Why? What was your routine? What did you do?" And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what I do. It needs to be, how much time have you got? Where are your specific weaknesses and strengths in your abilities? Have you got any injuries? Have you got any health issues and stuff? So you do have to be careful in this stage as well, not just about the martial arts instructor, but just taking a generic program off the internet and running with it. It might be the worst thing ever for you. You just don't know.
I'm completely in agreement with that. And this is, I get to ask this question a lot. Because many people that I train martial arts know that I'm a personal trainer, so they ask me questions about that, and almost always I'm going to say it depends. What's the best way to train this, or what should I do, weights first and then hit the bag, or vice versa? And then it's always it's a longer conversation. I ask a bunch of questions just to give people an idea. When I meet a new client or potential client, we sit down for at least an hour and a half, where I interview them and ask a bunch of questions. It starts with a medical checklist, like all the stuff I need to know, like, do you have this, do you have that, you have had that? So I can immediately know that, you're diabetic, okay, we have to take into account certain things, or you've had knee surgery, okay, what was the result? And we discuss things. And then we get to all the other stuff that is specific to that person that I need to know before I can even start suggesting, well, I think this might be an issue. It's physical, psychological, lifestyle, professional life. What does that look like? All those things come together. And then I make a proposal like, okay, I think with the goals you have in mind, and that's another thing, they usually have more than one goal. This is where I would start. And then we use the filter method. I'm going to throw a bunch of stuff in the filter, and something very concentrated will come out. And that is for you, your advice. And that will change over time as you progress through the different stages of the training that we will do. Beginning phase and so on is going to be very different from the phase you're in a year down the road. And then you might change, or your goals might change. Okay, we have to adapt again, and we always adapt. So I cannot you can give general advice when it comes to fitness that is based on the current best practices in sports science that you can do. But to make definitive statements, I think is bad. I wrote The Fighter's Body with Lauren Christensen many years ago. If we were to write it today, I'd have to write it from scratch again. And that doesn't mean that everything is wrong. It's just that some of the stuff needs more nuance. Other things I might say, well, yes, this is true, but I think there's a better way to do it, given the new science or the way it's evolved. So, and this is true in pretty much everything, and it applies here as well.
Yeah, no, I say that's why, it was a thing I was qualified at once. I don't regard myself as qualified in now because I haven't stayed up to date with it. And I think as martial arts instructors generally, I think that it's important that we stay in our lane. That we teach what we're good at teaching, and we know what we know, but we don't try to be, as we've discussed, the expert in everything.
Yep. No, that makes perfect sense. All right. How about we do one more?
Okay.
And that's because that's one that I absolutely wanted to do because it's one of my pet peeves. This one's from Pat Johnson. Because I'm a shodan in one art, I am now qualified to pass judgment on other arts and their techniques. So, Iain, maybe you can define shodan better than I can.
Yeah, well, yeah. So realistically, it means like fundamental level.
Yeah.
You know, it would be like a rough translation. So the
it's a rank.
means, you know, yeah, you've got the fundamentals down is essentially what that would mean. First degree black belt.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, if I was to make the argument for that, I would say that by reaching that point, you have an idea, a strong idea of what is fundamentally good technique within your system. And the methods of what a good punch requires is pretty much uniform across the piece. So therefore, having that good understanding of how things work in your art, you will be able to look at other art and see if they are violating the principles with which you are now familiar.
Yeah.
That's what I would say if I was making the case for that.
Yeah. And now, and this is, I'm going to leave you hanging because this is the one that I cannot find a way to defend this one. And
no, see, even then, as I'm talking, I'm editing what I'm saying because I know there's faults in it. You see, so that's why I went, you know, the fundamentals of your art. So we can probably start ripping this one straight apart. You know,
yeah, I don't see how anybody can anybody who says that, in my opinion, is very isolated in their training and very inexperienced and is in need of an ass kicking. And I will immediately add to that was me at one time.
Yeah,
I was the equivalent of shodan in my style, and I thought I was all that. And then I got my ass kicked by a bunch of people who were better than me and from different systems and so on that I knew nothing of. I was like, okay, I'm in Tai Chi class, and I got a bunch of guys doing slow motion stuff. I'm going to be able to own them. And then I got tossed around like a rag doll. I'm like, okay. And then I had a bunch of other instructors that I met that were able to very easily handle me. And I'm like, okay, there's just so much more to learn. And here I am with my, you know, shodan equivalent rank. So I think that is complete and utter nonsense. There's two things. There's one, something that I wrote, and that it's the cure for arrogance in the martial arts. And folks, I'm not pimping my blog. It's just that a lot of the stuff that we cover, I mean, obviously is not new to any of us. And these kind of discussions we've had that before, you might hear some new arguments, but martial artists have been talking about this for a long time. And often I just refer to my blog and some of the stuff, because then you can read in depth about this kind of stuff, as opposed to Iain and I just explaining all of that. So I'm not going to go too deep into that, but read it if you want to. You don't have to. I don't care. It's if that works for you, that's great. But there's a point here where somebody and I linked to that, made a small website with some illustration what it means to get a PhD. So that is a university degree, relatively high, and it's a circle. And it says the circle is imagine this circle contains all of the human knowledge. And you start in the middle in elementary school, and you've got like this little circle in the middle that's the stuff you learn. And you go to high school and so on, get a bachelor degree, and you gain more knowledge, but you also start to specialize. And then you get your master's degree, and then when you write your thesis, that is basically you going straight towards the edge of the circle in one specific direction, and then pushing the boundary of that circle a little bit further out, because your PhD is supposed to be something new. Like, this is new information that you add to the overall body of knowledge. Awesome. Look where you are when you hit that point of the circle, that you push the boundary, and be proud of your accomplishment, because it is an accomplishment. However, look at all the white that is knowledge that you don't have. There's so much more of it. There's vastly much more of it as opposed to what you know. So you don't know anything about most things. You know a lot about something.
Yeah. Well, I would add to this as well. As first Dan, you don't know a lot about one thing. You know, so you're not even at that point yet. I mean, like you say, I'm at 7th Dan now. I've been studying karate since I was a little kid. I still regard myself as There's loads I don't know. Never mind anyone else's art. There's loads I don't know about my own.
Yeah, true. And I think that's perfectly fine. And I wanted to touch on another thing as well from what he said, is that it's not just, well, I'm a black belt, so I'm qualified to do this and that. It's also to pass judgments on other arts.
Yeah.
And their techniques. And there's a really fun word. It's called ultra-crepidarianism. And I'll put a link in the show notes for this one as well. The point is this. That is, and I'm going to read the definition here, ultra-crepidarianism is a tendency for people to confidently make authoritative pronouncements in matters above or outside one's level of knowledge. Often these pronouncements fall entirely outside the ultra-crepidarians' realm of legitimate expertise. And I think that is so good. And if you again, I'll put the link in the show notes. It goes all the way back to Pliny the Elder, so that's Plinius for the people who spoke Latin, who was what was it, around the beginning of about 2,000 years ago, a Roman writer, and the whole idea is that there was this he talks about a Greek artist, and there's a cobbler. And he accepts the criticism of the way he created a sandal, but he rejected the advice that cobbler gave on anything else. And he said, shoemaker, not above the sandal. So you, as shoemaker, you can talk about sandals and correct me on that,
yeah,
but not anything else. And it's not like you're not allowed to have your opinion. Of course, you're allowed to have your opinion, but it's not an educated opinion, and you don't get to tell me in my specialization about stuff you don't know anything about. And think that you have a valid opinion. I mean, you can say it, but I don't have to. I can discount it. However, when it comes to your specialty, I'm going to listen to you. And if you say, well, you actually made that sandal wrong because actually we do it this way, thank you very much, and I'll correct it. But how that sword has to be shaped in the statue, I'm gonna ask a weaponsmith. I'm not gonna ask you, the cobbler. All due respect, but you don't know anything about that. So I'm like passing judgment on other stuff. I was once teaching my class, and it's in a big rec center, and there weren't a lot of people in class. And there's these two guys, judo guys, that come in, and they ask, can we use a part of the mat because we have like a belt test coming up and he needs to practice? I'm like, sure. So it's my Tai Chi class and we're doing applications, self-defense, this and that. And after a while, they're like, what do you guys do? I said, it's Tai Chi Chuan. What? I'm like, it's Tai Chi Chuan. Like, that's not Tai Chi. I'm like, yes, it is. No, that's not Tai Chi. That's not how people do Tai Chi. I'm like, okay. So I said, do you do Tai Chi? No. I'm like, okay. And I'm like, that's the way we're talking, because nothing good will come from any further conversation. And I'm like, so first you're very disrespectful to my hospitality when I allow you to come on the mat, when I actually pay for that mat time for you to use, just because. And I didn't know the guy. Said, but letting alone that is like, imagine me walking into your dojo. I'm like, hey, is that karate? Yeah, no, you're not doing karate. I'm like,
I've had that. Yeah, because when people have their own definitions of what they think it is from their, so I think where if we steel man it slightly again, some of the criticisms that I'll get aren't actually directed at me; they're directed at other people's karate that they've seen.
Yeah.
So to use your analogy, it's like saying, "Oh, I wore shoes and they fell apart." So you've had one specific experience of one specific shoemaker, not necessarily another type or a better type or a different type. So, there's sometimes, I think, within the karate field, some of the criticism we get, we deserve as a community because we bring it on ourselves. Even if that criticism wouldn't be valid, it's definitely valid in some quarters. But yeah, you do get that a lot. It's I think that's part of just the culture generally, though, not the martial arts as it is now. We for the first time in history, we've now all got the ability to broadcast our opinions to the entire world. So it almost like people feel that, okay, I need to have an opinion on everything. I found myself doing it. and then I have to stop and realize I have no idea what I'm talking about here. So I need to shut up and realize that, you know. I can still have an opinion, but I have to realize that's all it is. It's just a thought from an uneducated person who doesn't know a great deal about the topic he's waxing lyrical on.
Yeah, same here. I mean, I very much agree with what you said. This is like social media has basically given everybody a platform to, I mean, the internet in general, but I think social media is a big driving factor here, is that people have so many opinions, and it's so easy to, you know, take a clip of somebody practicing whatever art or technique, take it out of context, and then just ridicule it and say all kinds of stuff that look accurate for that given clip, but that clip doesn't represent it, like you said, the totality of all martial arts or that specific style. And bringing it back to this example, obviously, you know, the vast majority of the Tai Chi styles and practitioners that I've seen don't do self-defense applications, which is fine. I mean, I don't mind what other people do, and that's fine by me. I don't understand. I don't think that makes sense to me. Is do the whole art or don't do it at all. If you don't do the whole art, how can you understand the other parts that are not self-defense? But that's my opinion. But everybody's free to practice in any way they see fit, and if they enjoy it, that's fine. And of the ones that do practice martial arts, a lot of them, I think, practice in a very unrealistic manner, which is still their prerogative. I'm not saying you can't do that. I'm just saying, like, I don't do it that way. I wouldn't do it your way. I don't think that is actually realistic. But if you can make that work, awesome. I cannot make it work the way you do it. And for me, that is not self-defense related. It's just like fantasy stuff. And again, I'm willing to, you know, die on this hill if people are want to criticize me over that. I can give you example after example of Tai Chi guys doing stuff that I think is outlandish, and it's just completely fantasy land. And I'm sure a lot of people will criticize my stuff, and I'm like, okay, fine. Now, you want to criticize? Then you will have to be able to explain to me why I'm doing what I'm showing in that video. If you claim the ability to criticize, I want you to give me all the contexts that was there in this like 2-minute clip, because I know why I did that. I also know who I was teaching that and why and what level they were at and what specifically we were training that class. I know. So if you feel you want to criticize, fine, go ahead. But you're going to have to, you know, come up with some really good arguments, and you will have to be able to mind read, because the only way you're going to know what I was thinking when I was teaching that. So if anybody wants to take me up on that offer, I'm, you know, enjoy. And this is like the humility that you need to have, is that I don't know, like I've said in the beginning, there's a lot of stuff that I say that doesn't make any sense to me. But then, and the worst thing I allow myself to think is like, I don't know, I don't think that can work. I for sure know I can't make it work. I wouldn't teach it to anybody. I wouldn't advise anybody to like, okay, go check this out. This looks great for self-defense, or this can really work. I don't think I would recommend anybody that. But you know, nobody made me God or Ares the god of war, like I used to say, who can decide on this. So I'm like, vaya con Dios. If this is how you think it works, more power to you, and enjoy. It's a big world.
Yeah, it is. Yes, and I do something similar to make clear to people what I'm trying to achieve. I start pretty much every seminar. It's the first time I've been, I'll start with this saying, I am not for 1 second saying what I do is the best way or the only way. I'm just going to explain it's my way. I'll explain what I do and why I do it. I'll explain the thinking behind it. Then it's up to you to choose if any of this makes sense to you, and then it comes, you know, so because one is that frees them up to listen because they know I'm not giving the hard sell, and the second thing is it frees me up to teach as well, because I'm just giving it as I understand it. I also have the which was the point of this, you know, internet-based discussions and arguments. I do the same thing. What I'm always conscious of is what I want to really do is rip the issue apart. I'm quite happy to have this back and forth. I'll explain what I think, and you'll give me your best counter argument. And what I hope at the end of the day is not to convert the person I'm arguing with or anything like that. I just hope that when we've finished, whatever others can read, whether they agree with me or the other guys that are arguing the opposite position, the fact that we've had that dialogue produces useful information for those to make up their own minds about the way that they wish to go. Yeah. And you know, and then if I've done that, then it's been a worthwhile use of my time. Yeah,
I think I mean, that is how things should be. And I think that's kind of what we try to do here with this podcast episode, is just discuss things and like play the role of the internet troll and take the myth or the pet peeve as seriously as you can. And then also, I mean, like just now, this one here, I can't defend it. I think, and neither can you really, but you gave it a good try.
I'll give it a go.
But I'm like, I don't see any way in which you can claim like, well, you know, just because I'm a black belt in this, so now I can judge everything that is out there.
No.
Like that is nonsense. That's somebody with a god complex.
You do see it though. You definitely do see people do
yeah.
that. I understand why Pat's put it in. You do see people say, I've trained in this one specific thing for a number of years, and therefore I feel I can talk as an expert on every topic. You definitely do see it, so it's a good one for him to raise. But you're right. I think I'll give it my best shot through clenched teeth.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, so Mark McYoung's barbecue. You were there once, and I've been to a couple, and there's like a bunch. It's a special kind of thing. You've got people from all walks of life, from
they're great.
The other side of the dividing line, and then law enforcement and people with experience like you wouldn't believe. And then you usually have like this one guy who's there, who's like looking at like, wow, what's going on here, and he wants to jump in and be very, you know, it's very excited and talks up a storm, and then he might be spouting out all his theories about a bunch of stuff, and he's talking to the guy who's like an expert in that field, talking as if he has like you know, authority to discuss this with a professor in that field, and not in a way that he's like discussing. It's just like he's just basically on his pedestal, giving a speech and exactly like, let me tell you how things are in your field. And then usually everybody's like, okay, it's like the thing we have is like have a hamburger here, it's fine. Or like, you know, oh, you've been training for 10 years. That's great. Here's a hamburger. That guy's been training for 60 years. And maybe he knows a thing or two that you don't know yet, which you probably will if you train just as long. But like right now, maybe listen to that guy. And he's sitting right there having his hamburger. Just sit down and strike up a conversation. And you might be amazed at some of the stuff that he's very gladly going to share with you. If you start with that open mind, that is like you said, like there's a lot of stuff I don't know about my art. Okay, this guy has been in my art for twice as long as I've been alive. Maybe he knows something.
I generally, in life generally, it's one of the things that I've really learned is it's always better to defer to the experts. You know, so like when I want to, like when I'm putting a book out, I'm going to talk to printers and typesetters and publishers. You know, I know my subject, but I want to talk to the experts. I don't want to make an assumption about how the book industry works. And what I found is generally when you talk to those experts, they're happy to tell you about their area of expertise and want to listen to you about yours. And I found by listening to them, I then don't have to work everything out for myself because they'll quite happily tell me if I'll shut up and listen. You know what I mean? So I've always, I try and do it as much as I possibly can because I find it a good learning opportunity, you know, so just, shut my mouth, which is hard for me. but yeah, I'm someone who likes to talk, but I know if I do, if I listen to the experts, I'll get further than I would if I try to work it all out for myself. It's a fast track to knowledge.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm one of the really lucky. I think. Oh, you're back.
Yeah, it just popped up saying low battery. So. Oh,
okay. Well, I think we're going to have to wrap up anyway because I have to go get my car before the garage.
Yeah,
closes.
Me too.
Okay, Iain, this was awesome. I
really enjoyed this. This is an interesting format.
Yeah.
The bit I'm really looking forward to is as well. I'm going to have to avoid doing it myself. When you share the audio with me, this will be so fun to edit together. In a way that could ruin both of us.
Yes. Well, you know what? This is mutually assured destruction. So if you become creative with the editing, I will do the same thing. I've got some really good software here that I can use. Maybe we can use some deep fake software so I can make your head on the video say all this kind of funky stuff. No, this was a lot of fun. And I think we kind of got to the point. What we wanted to get is that, okay, there's a civilized way to discuss this, coming from our different backgrounds with different ideas and experiences and so on and opinions. And you came up with some of the stuff that I wouldn't have come up. Like some of the Steelman arguments you gave, I wouldn't have given. because I hadn't thought about it that way, which is what made it a lot of fun for me. And I think we try to do our best to be nuanced. I mean, like here in the last one, that was like, no, this is just stupid. This is like, don't be that guy. But other than that, I hope the listeners found this one useful. Would you be up for part 2 where we do the
100%.
questions?
Yeah, this is a lot of fun.
Okay, awesome. We're going
It's
to
like
have to
playing
plan
a
this.
video game type thing. How to make bad martial arts arguments convincingly. I get to be the villain. I love it.
I mean, you've got the beard. You have to make like this kind of special mustache, and like, you need some sort of pose, stapled fingers.
Yeah, that's what I need. I'll get the cat for the next one.
All right. Well, as soon as the recording stops, I'll try to send it to you, and then we can, if it works out for you, we can plan for recording part 2, because we didn't get to all the questions that we received.
I'm going to keep these here because that's a really interesting. I enjoyed that a lot. So I'm keen to do that. The next few weeks are good for me too, because I see all my overseas events are not happening.
Okay.
So I've got time. So maybe next week sometime or something like that, we can schedule something in and do a part 2.
Okay. So folks, you heard it here. There's going to be a part 2. I'm not, for now, we're not going to accept more questions because we have to finish this list to begin with. So that's important. Make sure we get to the end of the questions, and we'll see. And I would open the floor for suggestions this way, is that if you guys have other ideas for a crossover podcast that Iain and I could do, like we've done, I think this is the 4th or the 5th, I'm not sure anymore. We've done a few. And we've always tried to do something a little bit different, and that's a big part of the fun for me.
Yeah, same here. Yeah.
So if people have ideas like, hey, could you guys do this format, or talk about that? I'm open to suggestions. We'll see. No promises, but we'll see if we can make it work. But this is Iain, always a pleasure.
I enjoyed this, Wim. Thanks very much for your idea as well. It's a great one. So we'll do it again.
Okay, folks. So be on the lookout for the part 2 of this episode. We wanted to title it each individually on our podcast. Like he was going to title this one "Why Wim Demeere is Wrong," and I was going to title the episode "Why Iain Abernethy is Wrong." but that kind of doesn't work with the format. So I haven't given.
Why women Iain are wrong.
Maybe that would
I'm
work.
right and partially right.
We'll figure out how we call this one. Anyway, I'm going to close the recording right now, folks. So be on the lookout. I'll put all the links in the show notes of the stuff that we discussed, and be on the lookout for part 2. Okay, take care, everybody.
Yeah, take care.